This is part 2 of the series, The Fuck Happened to My Cost of Living in Australia That the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. Check out part 1. Let's go for part 2. Part 1, we talked about despite what the government or the government-funded media wants us to believe, inflation is not caused by us Australian publics overspending. It is not caused by us. It is caused by major corporations that own Australia's resources, essential utilities and resources, jacking up the prices due to profit maximization. In part 2, I'm focusing on the government's over expenditure that's causing inflation. Let's start with their military overspending, where the government will be spending $368 billion over the next 30 years. So by 2040, we have 8 operational subs. The question I want to ask is, why? Despite what Richard Marles, our defense minister, wants us to believe, or the media wants us to believe, we're protecting ourselves against China. Or what the Prime Minister wants us to believe, China is getting, quote-unquote, dangerous. You guys just access your critical thinking, which you have, but you just can't see it yet because of the smokes and mirrors caused by the Australian government propaganda. We are not building these subs to protect the Australian public. As per Minister Penny Wong, warns against the conflict and tension rise in the South China Sea, which is over here, South China Sea on the world map, which is surrounded by Philippines and Indonesia. And we are down here, thus known as the land down under. Now, fair dinkum, like honest to God, right? If the 8 subs were to protect, the North Pacific Ocean, the Coral Sea, Indian Ocean, Tasman Sea, South Pacific Ocean, I get it. But why the fuck, inside joke, you watch part 1 of my The Fuck series, why the fuck is Australian taxpayers, paying $368 billion to build 8 subs concerning the defense of the freaking South China Sea? In case you rednecks try to call me out and go, hey Q, you're pro-China, you're a commie, you're unpatriotic because you don't have the Southern Cross tattooed on your bloody face. Man, our guys in the helicopter has been attacked by China. Really? According to independent reports, and you can search yourself, the apparent Australian helicopter has been flying around the East China Sea. That warranted for Chinese jets to fire flares to say, hey mate, back off. It's like if I lived in South Australia, right? And say, for example, China is like Bankstown in New South Wales, right? Went through 50 motorways, right? I went across from South Australia, crossed Alice Springs, and went through Mildura, and then went to Wagga Wagga, and then went to M5, and I go towards Bankstown. It's 2 a.m. at night, and I hold up my fucking binoculars, and I'm in the bushes looking through one of the residents' houses in Bankstown. You reckon Mr. Habib in the house with the purple WRX will be like, hey brother, get out his phone like flares and go, hey brother, don't do that brother. Mate, compared to China, they just fired some flares and say, hey mate, brother, you're coming too close. We don't want to attack you. Compared to a true blue Lebo in Bankstown, you won't be going back to South Australia or where you came snooping from without at least a bruised face and 2 kebabs up your ass. Like, no joke. And the real joke is, and the Australian taxpayers like myself who are not laughing at the punchline is why the heck is the Australian government increasing the defense budget every single year for conflicts like the South China Sea that doesn't concern the safety of the Australian taxpaying public? For example, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, don't get me started on that. All these bloody wars, including the 2021 AUKUS agreement, which, signed up the bloody $368 billion submarines. All in all, as per this table over here, Australia's role to play the bloody loyal lapdog to the bloody Uncle Sam, the USA. Let's turn on our critical thinking. Why is Australia's defense policies and spending so heavily influenced by its alliance to the United States? Why is the Australian public, the Australian taxpayers, footing the bill to prioritize this expenditure to protect America's interests? Why are we wagging our tail in this position while old mate Uncle Sam over here goes, oh, howdy old pal, my old friend down under. I know your national debt is about $800 billion. I think it's about $1 trillion because undisclosed debt by the Australian government. And you have only collected $625 billion from your taxpayers. I want you to get more into national debt by spending 20% of your national debt on our military defense. I know a lot of you Aussies out there who love Captain America. Hey Q, that's a strong accusation. Let me show you the next table. I tabulated for you. According to my research, the US ownership in key Australian sectors, you can do your own due diligence as well. The US has 60% ownership in banking. Commonwealth Bank, Westpac, ANZ, 60% are shareholders from the United States. Retail, Woolworths, Wesfarmers, Coles, 65% owned by the USA investors. And as per my Part 1 to Fuck series, mining and energy, 76 to 70% is owned by foreign investors. I can go on. Communications, transport, utilities, food and groceries, more than 50 to 60% is owned by Uncle Sam's investors. Guys, do you now see full circle why we need those 8 submarines that cost $368 billion, which by the way goes into Uncle Sam's pocket? Obviously this is my humble opinion, but don't you think Australia's $368 billion investment in submarines appears to be more about safeguarding American interests than defending Australia's taxpayers' interests? And as you can see, Australia's key sectors such as energy, retail, finance are heavily owned by American investors. Because Uncle Sam has so much corporate power, because Australia is so privatized, half our country is owned by the United States, they have buying power to shape our geopolitical agenda, like old mate over here, who is not representing the Australian public's interests, rather representing America's interests. Uncle Sam's like, hey Penny, the bloody Chinese is expanding into the Indo-Pacific. It might affect our companies, mate. Remember, wink wink, we own half your ass. The Australian government scratching their head and go, what do you want us to do, Captain America? Like the Chinese, they know Kung Fu, we're scared of them. Woof woof, what should we do? Uncle Sam's like, you know what to do, mate. Wink, wink. $368 billion. You give it to us, we'll make some subs. If you do that, because we own half your ass, we'll give you some wink, wink, nice reward through some shareholdings. The defense minister's like, yeah, why not? Fuck it. I'm not paying for that shit. The fucking taxpayers are paying for it. When we taxpayers, the working ants, look at each other and go, the fuck happened to our cost of living? Well, this is the fuck is happening, right? Profit maximization, because the major essential key sectors in Australia are owned by foreign investors, more than 60%. Your cost of living being jacked up doesn't affect them. They don't live in Australia like us. They are overseas while they own the key sectors of Australia. On top of that, you chuck in $368 billion of expenditure to defend not Australia, but American interests, thus increasing inflation for us, which increases our cost of living by another fold. At the end of the day, no one cares about our cost of living, the Australian public, right? Look at our defense spending. What is it protecting? Think. Look at all these private companies that own the key Australian sectors. Energy, communications, mining, retail, banking, utilities, food and groceries. We don't own that. Owned by foreign interests. They're there to maximize their profit. They don't care about our cost of living. Therefore, why is the RBA increasing interest rates to fight inflation that we didn't cause? It's caused by these guys over there trying to inflate prices to make more bang for buck for their own bloody country, and to maintain the profit maximization strategies for the United States so that we profit gorge more of the Australian public. If any cheaper Chinese products and services enter into Australia, we'll sanction them, and also we'll make the Australian government pay us $368 billion, which is paid by the Australian public. We'll make sure with these ape subs that they'll be circling around the East China Sea, not the Indo-Pacific to protect Australia's borders, but around China's area, so that there's increasing tension between Australia and China. So the bloody Australian taxpayers will have to be forced to buy our products over here. Hopefully you now see through the smoke and mirrors that inflation is not caused by us overspending and being naughty. Inflation is caused by government overspending and prioritizing corporate greed, which unfortunately half the country is owned by foreign countries, which we, the public, cannot control due to privatization. And most importantly, sadly to say, our government has sold us out to be a lapdog to old mate Uncle Sam over here. If you like this series, follow for part 3 to the fuck happened to my cost of living that the government doesn't want you to know.